I'm going to just really quick give you an introduction, everyone, to, as you just heard, Haven Taylor, who is Haven influences include mental health advocacy movements and lived experiences receiving mental wellness support. And Haven has more than 15 years of experience working in the mental health field, including frontline peer and clinical support roles and building teams and programming. And joining her is Kels Perry, who has 6 years of peer experience, including direct support and managing peer programs, also chairing the peer advisory board for 2 years. And Kels is trained in intentional peer support and assists and identifies as queer and a mental health peer. So if anybody has any questions, I'm Cynthia, and I'm with Cher. I'm the marketing communications department. So you can text me in the chat room if you have any questions, and I'm going to let you go ahead and take it over, Haven.
All right, thank you. So yeah, I'm really excited to be talking to folks today about building a peer strategy that can guide our work, taking a lot of the learnings of doing the work for a while and looking at how to kind of build programming and grow in a way that is intentional and consistent with our value set. Let's see if it'll let me move to the next slide. There we go. Okay, so we are experiencing an explosive growth of peer support services, which is so exciting. And at the same time, we want to make sure that we stay true to peer values and peer principles. Having a clear vision and engaging in an intentional planning process provides a pathway for growth and implementation of our unique skills as peer specialists. Through a collaborative process of strategic planning, we can be inclusive of a variety of different perspectives, while identifying priorities that are mutual and that we can share in moving towards action with. So our kind of key learning objectives for today are to really understand the role of the vision statement in creating and guiding the strategic plan, talking about 6 common components that go into strategic planning, and then how to build out an action plan that includes all of the members of the organization. And to start things off, we will begin with a brainstorming exercise that we did within our peer strategy committee work. And I will kick it over to Kels.
Hey everyone, it's so great to be here and talk about peer strategy. It's something that, as Haven talked about, we really value and want to incorporate in everything we're doing at our agency. And to that end, so we have a peer strategy committee, and one of the things we worked on are these Mentimeter exercises. So we have here in front of us, what do you think of when you think of the word peer? Like, what does that bring up for you? So what we want you to do is use the link for the Mentimeter, which is that's active right now, Haven, or is it still not working?
It should be, and it's not showing in the top of the slide the way that it should.
You could maybe put it in the chat room.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So if we can't get the Mentimeter to work, so we'd love to have you participate in the chat while we're trying to figure that part out. What comes to mind when you think of the word peer? Go ahead and drop that in the chat and let us know what you think.
Ooh, apparently it's wanting me to sign back in.
All right.
Apologies for working this morning. We might, because we've got a smaller group, we could just kind of do some popcorning.
Yeah. So it looks like some folks see some themes of equality. So equal, being equal to someone. Someone also agrees with that there. Lived experience, community, personal experience, someone with shared experience, and an advocate with lived experience. So it seems like we have some really common themes around equality and personal experience or lived experience with some advocacy tied in as well. Oh, I like resource too. You have someone having equal power, resource. Yeah, these are all different words that come to mind when we think of what peer means. And it's a very, we may have a collective idea of what peer means, but it also can be very individual depending on the person. And when you start doing peer strategy work, you want to kind of get a mind map, sort of a brainstorm on what that looks like. So when we, equal standing, yep, that's a very good one too. Let's see. So One of the common themes we saw when we did this work also is people do talk about having that shared power component, the lived experience component. Those are really valuable things that have come up many times when we've done this exercise. Is there anything else anyone's thinking of that comes to mind? No, it's not a huge group. I didn't count if it was the full 11 who responded, but all answers are great. I love these answers. Okay. Does anyone have any thoughts about the observations of the common themes here that people are saying? You feel free to unmute and chime in if you'd like. That's okay. It's early in the morning. I get it. It's hard to just unmute and just start talking. Trust me, I got you there.
Hey, it's Manzi here.
Oh, hey. Hey, Nancy.
I think that something that stands out for me with this is that not only are all of these included, but it's someone who has this kind of like attractive way about them because they have found out how to do these things that they're able to share with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And how important it is to be able to be like an example of what somebody could acquire if they are to work with someone who has found their way.
Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate that. Thank you, Manzi. That's a really good point. I think that is a common theme, right? That we are using that experience as peers to support someone and finding the path that works best for them and supporting their recovery and whatever that looks like. And so having these common themes is really helpful to sort of tie in when you're doing strategy work. What are we seeing as peer and what are those broad themes and things that we all can relate to? So why don't we move on to the word strategy? Or Haven, are you bringing up one of the word clouds we did before? Okay, yeah.
In lieu of the Mentimeter working, this is an example of the word cloud that we came up with in our work.
And when you're doing strategy work with folks, this actually is really nice to have this kind of visual because people are different, you know, we all have different styles of learning. Visual learning here, also just seeing the bolded words for those who may be not as familiar with Mentimeter are ones that people agreed on that came up as a common theme. So it bolds the ones that people are putting in a lot of. So like respect, mutuality, I can't speak today, mutuality, and lived experience collaboration. So why don't we do the same thing with the word strategy? So go ahead and drop in the chat what you think of when you hear the word strategy. Calculated, thank you. Planning ahead, love that. Guiding principles to achieve a goal. Idea for how to meet a need or accomplish a desired goal. Collaboration, the best plan to execute something. Ways to overcome situations. Excellent, yeah. So a lot of collaboration, a lot of working together to bring something to fruition. Love that. Ways in which to approach, very true. Plan of action. Did everyone get a chance to share what they thought? Okay. Thank you, Manzi. Navigating resolutions and solutions. Oh yeah, Kayla, bringing minds together to create something greater, moving towards a greater good. Bonnie, yeah, you're very right. Strategy does require buy-in to be successful, right? People have to be on the same page to feel that this is something that they can do as long as aligning with values and mission and vision, which we'll get on to later, is really important. And so it's definitely important to have people feel comfortable and buy into what that strategy is, so it is more easy to execute later on. But yeah, no, these are all great answers. I'm seeing like a lot of, again, collaboration. There's some values that I'm seeing popping up here as well. Intentionality, which is very important for strategy. And also just, you know, navigating those ups and downs of strategy work too, the resolutions and the solutions. Let's see, someone else said something that sets a common direction. Yes, that's also true, Bonnie. What are some folks' thoughts about the themes and comments we're seeing here? Would anyone like to unmute and kind of share what they think? You can see ours here as Haven put it up there.
For me,
comment. So sorry. Just a quick comment. My eye went to the word chess. And I found that interesting because I think it's so true that you can define a strategy, but you have to realize that there's kind of a push and pull, a dynamic involved, and it's okay to adjust a strategy
Mhm, for
um,
sure.
along the way, depending on how it's landing in the real world.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, Bonnie, because strategy has to be adaptable, right? We can have a great overview and a plan, but there may be shifts or changes we're going to have to accommodate, maybe with the agency's needs or with, value shift or whatever it may be. We have to be mindful and adaptable. So thank you for that contribution. I saw somebody speak up. Can't see the name.
Best laid plans never fully survive contact with reality.
Yeah, for real. Let me see if I can see the person's name if I make it bigger. I know there's one other person who was speaking up. Did they want to chime back in?
Yeah, I was, my name is Jerry. And so what I was thinking about was the collaboration part of it, working in the mental health field and having peers, trying to stay, I guess I would say, in the lane of a peer's support in the mental health field. So that takes a lot of planning and thinking ahead, and how to be able to support a client for what the organization is asking for, and also stay in your lane, at the same time. So that's what I thought about, being strategic in that way, to be able to be supportive but yet stay in the lane of a peer.
No, you bring up a great point, Jerry, because peer drift is something that comes up in any organization where there's integration, right? Even though those are very necessary things to have multiple teams, and can be very beneficial to have a clinical residential team, housing team, whatever it may be. There can be peer drift. There can be times where we might have to course correct or figure out what is the peer role here versus maybe what the expectations of that peer role are. And the beauty of doing strategy is, like you mentioned, like keeping that in mind when we're doing that strategy piece. And building a strategy helps have sort of the guidelines, the framework, the structure that we can kind of go back to and say, hey, this is the direction we're going. And it makes it easier for people to typically understand, like at an executive level, what we're trying to achieve by having that peer strategy component.
Yes.
I love that. Thank you.
That's one of our biggest challenges that we have where I work at.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Peer drift is real. Thank you.
It's a common experience. Yeah.
Anyone else have a share that they have, or any other thoughts they had based on these two exercises?
I just want to comment on what Jerry said. I thought it was really important. And it made me think that in terms of strategy and the peer role, like Jerry was saying, as you're working with peers in the workplace, revisiting the strategy periodically is important, because you can veer off track and kind of get co-opted by the more clinical approach to services. And a strategy, as long as it's like a living document that is brought forward to a team periodically to remind everyone, what the peer role is, I think is really important. So Jerry's comments made me think of that. So thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
No, you're both very right. Yeah, it's a good way to kind of, it's good to revisit strategy because things can change. It's also good to revisit it to remind us what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then also to remind, as you said, you and Jerry both had kind of remind other folks in other divisions of what the peer strategy and lens and goals are, so we don't get too far off course with those things. So thank you for all the shares and thoughts around that. That's very helpful. So we're going to do an overview here. There's, of course, a number of different ways that you build a strategy out. And the first one is a mission statement. So this may be your organization's mission statement. Typically, that's where you would see a mission statement most. So as defined here, it's a brief written statement, describes an organization's purpose, goals, and values, and it will serve as a guide for decision-making and will communicate to stakeholders what our organization stands for and what it's aiming to achieve. So I'm sure any organization you'll already work for probably has a mission statement right now. And we'll share new narratives here. New narratives is from clinical care and peer support programs to housing. We provide the resources so people seeing mental health care can develop the tools to thrive, not just survive. And I will say one thing that was really nice about New Narrative's way of tackling the mission statement is they were very much collaborative with other parts of the division, peer division, residential, like clinical, all of the divisions were really brought in to make this statement together, because we used to be Luchtdorf and rebranded as New Narrative in 2020. And during that time, they really took a lot of, made a lot of effort to include many points of view, including participants' point of view, staff's point of view at all different levels. And so that's why this is a lot more person-centered and person-driven. And then we look at the vision statement. So the vision statement is something that when we were doing this strategy work, you're going to come up with as you do that work, that bring the values in here. So let me just go ahead and we'll go over the definition of what that is. So you're wanting, with a vision statement, you're wanting to be concise. You don't want it to be super long, you know, like 14 to 20 words we found is kind of the sweet spot, just so you can get your statement across more easily and have people understand where you're coming from. It is a future-oriented declaration that describes that long-term state or outcome that the organization or the individual wants to achieve. And it needs to articulate the aspirations and goals of that organization or individual and provide a picture of what that success is going to look like in the future. So our vision statement down here. So with the peer strategy work we did do as a committee, we worked on this together. So we started out with, before I read it here, a number of words, and then we kind of narrowed it down from there. We took very specific words we wanted intentionally to be in this vision statement, but we also kept general themes to encompass a wide breadth of like experiences and intent and goals. So our peer vision, service vision statement we came up with ultimately was, we envision a world where lived experiences are valued and integrated, creating meaningful change and opening paths to purpose, connection, and community. And just so you know, when you're crafting this with your folks, when you're doing this strategy work, this is a really great time to find out what people's different values are, what their interests are, what matters to them, and how do we synthesize those things into something we can agree is going to best encompass those values and beliefs, while also pushing us towards a specific future-oriented declaration like we have here at the bottom. So for instance, equity is very important. We also want to make sure we're choosing our words very carefully, because we also have an equity statement in our agency, and it's implied in here as well when we're talking about how we want the lived experiences to be valued in the same way other experiences are. So that's what you want to be thinking about when you do that strategy statement, the vision statement, excuse me.
I think something else that we considered as we were doing this work was, this is new work within our agency. We've had peer programming, but we haven't had this kind of intentional strategic planning or vision setting. And so we made an intentional choice at the outset that peer specialists who are in direct support positions were the ones who really came together and set that vision. We have not invited other disciplines into the vision setting for peer services at this time, really to try to recognize that peer drift is real, and so wanting to generate something that is ours that we can then link back to the broader work.
Yeah, and we did, the other thing we did do is also incorporate feedback. The strategy committee existed with that peer vision very intact. Like Haven said, didn't necessarily bring in residential or clinical into this space, not because there isn't anything that they can offer here, but this is meant to be very intentionally with that peer lens in mind. And we also solicited feedback from our peer advisory board here at the agency, which is a great way to kind of bounce ideas off potentially peers not in your agency, if you do have one of those. And also sharing with peer leadership as well, who were not necessarily represented in this specific committee, because they're going to have different ways of approaching these things. Ultimately, the committee did come up with a statement, but we did also seek feedback from other corners of our peer division world in the agency. I think that's on to you, Haven.
All right, so the next piece that we've done is the SWOT analysis. So SWOT is a strategic planning tool that is essentially kind of an assessment to figure out where are we right now. at this point in time, and looking at internally, what are the things that we do really well, and what are our areas for growth. And then externally, what opportunities do we see kind of in the landscape, in the community, what's happening systemically, what potential funding opportunities are out there, kind of all of the various things that exist outside of our organization that are opportunities, and then what are some of the things that might be out there coming down the way in the next kind of 3 to 5 year term that may potentially be harmful or create barriers to achieving the vision that we are moving towards. This is also an area where we really spent quite a deal of time, a couple of months, and went to a variety of different teams and spaces to really get input from as many different people as was logistically possible. So the outcomes of the SWOT analysis, we had probably 50 or 60 pieces of feedback in every single area. So from there, we distilled all of that feedback into kind of the top themes that we found, and then brought it to the peer advisory board, peer leadership team, and the peer strategy committee, which were kind of the 3 main peer services generators for this work. So some of our particular strengths are that we've got peer values centered throughout all levels of the organization. We have a lot of folks who've been working in this field for a while and have a great deal of lived experience, expertise, and working in effective and innovative programming. And we've got a pretty diverse array of different types of peer services programming, from peer-run programs, housing focused, and then clinical and residential spaces that meets a variety of different people in a variety of different places. Some of our areas for growth are a lack of consistent processes and communication. So we've got this great diversity of programming that also has created some silos, and you know, we might be having different groups of people working towards the same goals, and so that's not a very efficient use of people's time if we could be working together more effectively. And also just having processes that we can kind of come back to and agree on. Resource scarcity is always a concern, staff to participant workload ratios, and then recruitment and retention of diverse staff are the 2 areas that we really want to focus on and name. And then the historical effects of siloing peer programming as separate from the rest of the agency, particularly the peer-run programs. Some opportunities that are out there that we're kind of all seeing. There's a lot of opportunities to develop external relationships. There's spaces like this. There's spaces that may be regional or within the metro area, capturing the existing momentum. There's a lot of interest in peer services right now, which is amazing. And with that is coming an opportunity to expand programs and resources being funneled in, which at its best, we can build the system we want to see. And then the flip side to that is that we are also trying to build within a system that may have kind of uncertain futures of funding, and or some of the more stable funding sources mean getting a little cozier with the medical system, which is not a system that has historically shared our vision and values, which leaves us vulnerable to tokenization and co-optation. And so in our strategic planning, we're wanting to really lean into the possibility and the hope while being realistic about the need to be intentional and strategic if we want to continue to build in the direction that fits with our values. The next piece is landing on a strategic framework, because there are a ton of different ways to do this, and there isn't really a right way or a wrong way. There's just what works for you and your organization. So this is a graphic that we found really helpful in thinking about, okay, where are we in terms of, are we pretty early on? Are we trying to grow pretty fast? Or are we kind of further along as an organization? Where are we in terms of having strategy and planning? Are we formulating, or are we executing? So as an agency, we've been around for a while, and the bulk of our peer programming has actually been around for 10 to 20 years. So we are also expanding into integrated and team-based care spaces, and that's newer. So we've got this funky mix of new and old. And then as far as being thoughtful and having the support of the upper leadership within the organization to develop a strategic plan and execute it, we are kind of earlier on in that stage. This is, as I said, the first time that this work is really being invested in to the degree that it is. So we landed on the value disciplines framework as being kind of a good balance for us and where we're at. Another one that we strongly considered using was McKinsey's strategic horizons, and all of these are super Googleable. There's lots of information out there. McKinsey's strategic horizons really focuses on like what's happening right now, what do we want to be doing in the near future, and what do we want to be doing in the further future. Value disciplines looks at what are some of the different, if we've got kind of horses pulling the cart, and one horse is the focus on the customer experience, one horse is the focus on our product, which in this case is programming, and another horse is just operational efficiency, being super, super efficient with our operations. All three of those things are important to be able to move the plan forward, and one of those horses has to lead. So what we landed on within that is to use the value discipline framework and really looking at leading with peer values in all of our programming. And so taking kind of that, we're calling it peer leadership value, that really we're committed to making sure that we've got the peer values throughout our agency, and that we are moving towards a place where 100% of our direct support peer specialists are supervised by people who are peer specialists themselves. We're so close. And this graphic just can help for folks that are more visual, look at. So we're working within the mission statement. That's going to be the agency mission statement, because that's the agency we're at. And then we're starting from this place of what we identified in the SWOT analysis, and we're moving towards our vision. And we're using the value discipline framework and really those peer values as the lens through which we're going to explore then 4 different pillars or areas that have been identified by your organization or by you through this process as being 4 key areas to focus on. Doesn't have to be 4, generally 3 to 6 is recommended. We are using similar pillars to what the rest of the organization has used in the agency-wide strategic plan to just support alignment with that, and because it fits for what we're trying to do. So cultural transformation, organizational capacity, awareness and advocacy, and the participant experience are the 4 pillars that we are going to be basing our goals around. So Kels, I will send it back over to you for goals and objectives.
Excellent. Yeah, it looks like someone had a question in the chat regarding the PowerPoint being shared and how to get a certificate. I believe that we can share the PowerPoint. I'm not sure about the certificate specifically.
We have sent in the PowerPoint, and I believe that PowerPoints and videos from previous conferences are available on the share webpage. I'm not sure how the certificates of attendance are working, but I'm imagining that they're probably going to registrants afterwards. That may be something that the host can speak to at the end.
Sounds good to me. All right, so yeah, taking that strategic format into mind and with the SWOT analysis, when we look at goals and objectives, we kind of break those down in specific ways. If you could go to the next slide there, Haven. So a goal is going to be that long-term vision. Like a long-term goal is a statement of how we're going to be achieving the vision. And we want those to focus usually 3 to 5 years into the future. But the really important thing about long-term goals, when we're breaking them down into objectives, is they need to advance the goal. So each long-term goal is broken down into 1-year objectives that are going to advance it overall. And we want objectives to also be smart, in this case, smarter, rather. So they're going to need to be specific, right? You know, it is important to have general themes and ideas, but if you're trying to break it down into an objective that can advance the goal, you need it to be very specific about what that is. It needs to be measurable. So it needs to be something that we can see over time. How is that going to work? Did it work? Is there a way that we're able to achieve that by measuring it? Achievable, of course, like that's the main thing, right? Like we can have great ideas, but if it's not realistically achievable, which is the very next one, that's not going to be something that will drive the overall strategy work and can be more aspirational in nature. You also want it to be time-based. We want to have objectives that are time-based so we know how long things are going to take, because we might need one objective done in order to get to the next objective. And if that's not done and we don't have any kind of clear timeline there, then it's hard to move on to the next strategic step. You know, and evaluate. So you're evaluating that when you first do it, you're reevaluating, is this still serving my overall vision and goal, the vision statement, our strategic plan, and then you're recording it, record what works, recording what didn't work. So we have some learnings that we can take away from that and figure out how do we apply those learnings to other strategic objectives we might develop over time in this goal, in this planning. So we're going to give an example here of what that looks like for our agency to give sort of an idea. So you can see the pillar here is cultural transformation. As Haven talked about, there's multiple pillars that we were looking at here, and this is the one that we created a clear goal and objective right now, among others. But the goal here in our case would be clear and consistent understanding across our agency new narrative of the peer specialist as a role with its own unique skill set, focus, and duties. We've often found in integrated teams that has been a little bit of a challenge, which is why it was really important to us to focus on that in our strategic plan. And so when we break down those objectives, when we're talking about making those smarter objectives, what that looks like is, so we're going to implement the national guidelines for peer specialists and supervisors, and that's created by the National Association of Peer Supporters. So we have people who've already done this really great legwork. They've made a great framework, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel every time to get an objective completed. So that's why we're using those national guidelines. We also want to begin monthly cross-program co-reflection groups, and that's going to focus on core competencies each month. So the core competencies that are brought up from the national guidelines, so we can really dig into what those are. And then of course, that also is going to look like we're going to need to update our human resources systems. We're going to have to be looking at revamping the job descriptions, the policy, performance review criteria, because we want to have that consistency with the national guideline recommendations. So having it like this is very helpful, because then we know that these are some achievable, time-sensitive goals that we can do together to make the overall goal met. And then we look at the cascading action plan, which is very much a part of this as well. So a cascading action plan, as you can see in this neat little graphic that Haven found. So we have the goal here, right? So the goal is that we want to have that clear and consistent understanding across new narrative of the peer specialist role. And the goal leads to the objectives that I mentioned. I mentioned those 3 objectives earlier. Those are the 3 objectives we're aiming for. So the purpose here is to ensure that everyone in the organization and or the team is working towards that same goal and has a clear understanding of what we need to do to achieve it. And it takes that overall objective, those 3, when we're using that example again, and it cascades it down to like, where will it live, with what team, with what committee, with what project or program. And it breaks it down into tasks and projects at each level of that organization. And this is also so we can create a pathway, because the strategy work is very big, it's comprehensive. And so we really need to understand what is that clear pathway of identified manageable steps that's going to support the team members in seeing how their individual contributions are moving the vision forward. And it also allows for easier monitoring of progress and making adjustments as needed. So like what we talked about earlier with evaluating it. What didn't work, maybe we're doing this and we find one of those objectives we talked about actually really isn't going to work in that 1 year time frame, or maybe we need to tweak it a little bit because it's not really going the way we thought it was going to go. And so being adaptive and using this action plan or something like this action plan is very helpful to kind of be accountable to the progress we're trying to make, and also be like, hey, maybe this isn't working the way we thought it was going to, and we're going to go back to the drawing board, which is all part of this process. There's no failure really, and that's kind of mentioned in a slide a couple back, but failure is a big component of this, and that's not a bad thing because we learn each time from that. So you just kind of see it breaks down little by little, step by step, task by task. So we're going to give you an example too of the cascading action plan here. So I love the arrows, so just follow along with me as best we can here. So the arrows. So the objective was to implement the national guidelines for peer specialists and supervisors created by that National Association of Peer Supporters. So we had to think, what does that look like? Because when we look at a cascading action plan, as we talked about earlier, you need to have those identifiable steps, because if certain things don't happen, it's going to slow down that process. We're going to get stuck. So we recognize team-based care is a really important part of how we're going to make that happen. So you see here, if you look on the right side of the graphic, excuse me, I'm going the wrong direction, the left side of the graphic. So you're looking here, we hired the program manager, but that also had a number of steps involved in it. So it isn't just like we have a program manager now, right? There's things we have to do to make that happen. So that means Haven and HR had to get together and talk about these different steps. So we post that position, the recruiting specialist gets involved in February. We're conducting interviews throughout March, and Haven's bringing in other peer support specialists in the agency, other folks in the divisions to interview as well too. So we can, for team-based care, because that is a very comprehensive, I should have clarified that. That's residential, that's clinical, that's peer services wrapped up together. It's the integrated care component. So we do need people to have presence there that are representing from these different areas. And then after we've done these interviews, interviewed a couple different people, we confirm that offer, we hire the individual, and they do onboarding. So that's the first part of the team-based care objectives that had to be broken down into these smaller steps. And then when we start doing that, we go over to looking at what does that mean as we get like the onboarding and training going, as we build that comprehensive foundational knowledge of team-based care and implement it in our agency. That's going to be reorienting the team sites that already exist, site teams, excuse me. It's going to be, all right, once we're reoriented those site teams, we can move forward with the next part, which is creating training that can be applicable and standardized, consistent across the board. And then we need to build a plan of how do we provide this training. And you can see these things, they can take a couple months, right? It's not going to be just bam, 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 every single thing, one right after the other. It does take time for us to reach that, and that's totally fine. That's part of that process. And then providing the training, we're going to utilize that in consultation ongoing and also in supervision ongoing, because these are both areas where we found team-based care and implementing the guidelines is going to be very important. And then after that, we want to obtain feedback from the team-based care frontline staff and residents to see what's working. So that's the evaluate, that's the record part. That's us trying to figure out what worked, what didn't work, and then moving forward with those learnings to inform, again, the rest of the strategic work we're going to do. I know Haven has some tips on learning to share with you, unless there's something I've missed here you want to add in there, Haven.
Nope, we can move into tips and learnings, and then we wanted to leave a good chunk of time for questions, because this is a process that definitely is going to be really specific to your spaces, and our hope is to provide some familiarity with some tools that you can then adapt in ways that work for you. So as Kels was saying, when it comes to achieving our goals, our failures are nothing more than success and progress. Some of the things that are already in components of our strategic plan are learnings that we have from trying some things and having some of them work and some of them not work so well up until this point. And that is going to continue to be our story because that is this work. And we wanted to start with it's okay to be self-taught. Neither Kills nor I has any kind of formal education in doing this, but the internet is full of free resources. And through talking to folks that have experience and reading and watching YouTube videos and looking at how other spaces have used some of these tools, adapted them from the corporate world, which is where a lot of them got developed, into nonprofit, and then how can we adapt them again into peer services specifically. We're constantly learning and evolving the process. Something else that we've learned is to create visuals of the process and discuss them. And really it's more the creation and the discussion that is useful than having this like perfect process map or thing to come back to later on down the line as we go, just because a lot of, especially the early work, the mission, the vision, talking about a strategic framework is really abstract. And the visuals can help ground us as we try to take all of those abstract ideas and build a more concrete plan out of them. As we've been working with different folks. So a little self-disclosure, I have a learning difference and it shows up as challenges with visual processing. I'm much more auditory. However, most people learn visually. And so having visuals that can help to ground folks with a variety of different learning styles can be really important for just sharing a common language. It can also be helpful as we look at, are we staying within the scope of the plan? Are we staying focused on what we're trying to achieve? As we talk about each one of these different areas, it's really easy to start trying to solve all of the world's problems in that room and get away from building the plan for the longer term. And to also figure out, okay, if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. So how can we get clear on what our goals are and bring things back to them, and then figure out, okay, what if something else is coming up that feels like a priority, we can take a look at it and go, okay, is this something that needs attention now? If so, then maybe we need to adapt or adjust the plan. And if not, then maybe we can put it in a parking lot so that we're still thinking about it and tracking it, but we're not getting distracted from the larger goal or work. And finally, one of the most key pieces is ongoing two-way communication and coordination throughout the organization. If you're not there yet and you don't have really solid communication strategies, I know that we don't, that's going to be a component of our plan. Build it into the plan. We've got pockets that communicate and coordinate really effectively, and then we've got kind of silos that exist in between those pockets. And what we're really trying to do is to widen that field of where the collaboration is taking place. Some early work that has been key in us getting to this point where we can really put the time and intention in and include the number of people that we have was in the rebranding, started with the rebranding that Kel's talked about at the beginning. So the agency has a new mission that is more person-centered, it is more inclusive, and focused on peer values, and included significant influence from our peer advisory board. We also have the benefit of support from executive leadership, and now we have a peer services voice in that team, which is my role. It's a new role within the agency, and having that that support from kind of the executive and upper leadership of the organization clear through to direct services has been transformative. We also recognize that, like, for folks that are working in peer-run organizations, amazing. You're starting with that. For folks that are working in agencies that provide traditional services within the medical model that may not have the same level of understanding and buy-in for what peer services really is, you can include that even as if you're thinking about a strategic plan within a smaller scale or pocket within that organization. Part of what you may choose to build in is how to build relationships and cultivate champions in other sectors of your agency that could strategically support getting peer services to be well understood and have a seat at decision-making tables. So that brings us to the end. And we definitely want to hear about y'all's vision and plans and where you're at, and also just talk a little bit about how you might apply some of these concepts or activities, or how to get started, because it is it's a big lift to get started. Once we get started, we found we went slow in the beginning, and now things are moving faster and faster, but it does take a bit to get there.
Yeah, the process can feel a little awkward at first, especially if it's never been done before, which lots of us haven't had the opportunity to build these kind of things out. It's a newer thing, I feel. And so, like Haven said, it may be slow at first. There might be some stops and starts, but like, stick with it, and just continue to learn from all of that, because it helps just with the momentum later on as well, and the buy-in. But I know we also wanted to give folks time to ask questions. Was there any questions, anything that we can, yeah, Bonnie. Go ahead.
Yes, so I'm curious about your organization. It sounds a lot bigger than the one I'm in. Does your vision and strategy include family peers as well, or is it consumer peer oriented strictly?
Great question. A little background on our agency probably would be helpful. So we are primarily working with adults living with mental health related challenges. So we're in that consumer space. Family peers is an area that I think there's definitely a lot of opportunity for growth, but it's not something that we're currently actively doing.
Mm-hmm.
Did that answer your question, Bonnie? Did you have anything else we could clarify?
This has been really great. What a great presentation, so organized and very informative. And I'm very happy you all came. And I wanted to let you know that I'll post in a second the session so that you know what is coming next. And what's coming in next in this particular room is at 10:30. We are having a session. 1 second. I'm turning the page here. There we go. On how we can better serve veterans. And there's of course a whole schedule which I'll put up in a minute. But if you have more questions, I did want to mention, I said it in the chat, that if you want to put in the chat your information, we will give you a certificate of attendance so that you can show that you were here, and we'll email it. And these sessions are recorded, so they'll be posted at a later time, and you can find them on our website. And I put that information in the chat room as well. But I'll let you folks wrap it up here, do as you wish, and then we'll move on to the rest of the exciting day. And thank you. This has been really, really great.
Thank you.
Do you want to stop sharing maybe? I think everybody's
Oh yeah, stop sharing now.
No, just so that way I can post the schedule in just a second here. Does anybody else have any questions? This is so great.
My name is Annette, and I just wanted to say that I'm glad that the question was raised about families, because I work with families in my county for mental health and behavioral health. And I'm the only peer mentor in this position working with the families. So I was hoping to hear more about that. But if you know of any other workshops throughout this day that would be around that area, let me know.
And then I'm going to take a quick look at the schedule too, and I'll DM you in a second.
Yeah.
I will say though, we do so on the peer advisory board, people who are family peers are welcome there. There have been people who are coming from families and sharing their lived experiences and insights and experiences in that space. The peer strategy space in particular may not have that represented as much, though people may also share that identity. But we do still solicit and care about the feedback of family peers as well. They just show up more in the peer advisory board setting.
Yeah, I work in the team of Birth to 5 as a peer support worker here at Behavioral Health, and I find myself useful.
Oh no, of course,
yeah.
Of course,
and,
you're very useful.
Yeah, I find that, but it's new to this team. It's new to this agency period for a peer mentor working with a Birth to 5 parent and child team. Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's new.
I think that's really great though, Annette. That's really awesome that you're doing that. Really valuable and important work to support the families through that whole process.
Thank you.
Being a parent.
Yeah. In my work, we deal, the treatment program is for young people with experiencing the onset of psychosis.
Yes.
And so ages 12 to 30. So family support is very important. So we have both consumer and family peers. But I just wanted to say that I think today's presentation was really interesting and helpful because the family space basically needs all the things you've presented as well. And then to integrate that with the consumer side is makes it like, the superhero kind of combination. That's the best of both worlds. So thank you.
Yeah, no, and I hope that the frameworks that we've shared, the ideas are going to be applicable and helpful in any setting. That's the goal ultimately, is that even if we're coming at it from different angles in the field, that we're all going to learn from each other, and then it will help families also supporting loved ones as well as the folks that are, actually consuming the mental health services. Jerry, did you have a question? I saw you on mute.
Well, I just wanted to actually make a comment. This has been really for me, like a beginning of groundwork, of direction. I work in at Tri-City Mental Health Authority in Pomona, and I came in as a peer. It'll be 6 years in May. So I came in as a frontline, person working on the adult side, the adult outpatient side. And then so now for the past 2 years, I'm actually the supervisor of our team because our formal supervisor moved on. So I came in without any training and just hitting the ground running. And so where I am, I even had to try to, understand how the hiring process was done, who they hired and for what reason, because of their, different lived experiences. So there's a team of working on the adult outpatient side and a team working on the TAY side with the youth. And so we're working with I recently hired in for a grant program that they started, a parent partner, peer specialist, and then a TAY peer specialist to work with a special grant team. And then, like I said, we have our adult outpatient and then our children outpatient, and with different backgrounds, me, drug and alcohol, some mental health, a bunch of things, right? So I've just been trying to like I said, it's been hit the ground running without any training and doing the best that you can. So it's good to hear, that others have, you brought up the trainings on the internet. This share has been wonderful. with the different trainings. And so you can actually see what you're doing and what you're supposed to be doing, what to look for, how to study for the core competencies, to see, what our mission statement really is as a peer, and how to provide that support to the people that we're, supporting, and how to explain it to the team that we're working with, what we're here for, and we're not case managers. We're not, we're not just to fill a gap, if you're short staffed, and because we've done all of those things. And when we first started, understandably with the initial supervisor, it was like just, okay, let's just start this and we'll get in where we fit in, help where we can. And so now it's making it a little more difficult to separate. We're not just here to get in where we fit in. This is the role that we actually are here for. So that's where it's been kind of challenging now, especially now that we're getting ready to deal with Cal Ames, and with that open door of, people being able to come in without a diagnosis, whatever. And not only that, but we're going to start implementing a system of care, where it'll be a team approach, for the clients that come through. It's like, okay, so how do we can't, our team is with me included, is a team of 10, me making the 10th, with being the supervisor. And, how do we do that? How do we be a part of the care support of over, hundreds of people? We can't do everybody. How do we do that? So this has been very helpful for me. And even directed me on, what to look for, so I can be trained to know, what I'm doing, and like I said, how to bring it to the organization. So we can streamline this, and everybody, we can support to the best of our ability, so the clients can grow and be, learn to be self-directed. And so, yeah, this is like, for me, this is like groundwork. I'm just overjoyed.
I love to hear that, Jerry. Amy and I have pretty similar stories in our world too. Like I became a manager kind of when the manager left many years ago, and it was like not really clear training or really clear goals and what that looks like. So I totally resonate with what you're talking about, because sometimes with peers, we really have to just build the bridge as we're walking across it. And so the peer strategy, at least, is that foundational framework, like you're saying, like that's helpful to at least give a vision of like, how do we even build, and how do we make sure the bridge is stable, not just like walk over and then it falls apart and we have to build it back up again, which can happen too. But no, I really appreciate your sharing everyone's comments and shares, because if this was helpful in any way to anyone, that's of course always the objective for us, is that we want to take the stuff that we put together with other peers as well, and bring that out there, because yeah, there isn't a whole lot of options for peers when it comes to strategic work or things like that, or at least foundational stuff. And NAPS is really good too for the peer core competencies, which Haven can speak to more. But yeah, we also work with TIG Youth as well too, and a number of other folks. But yeah, Haven knows more about that than I do. But thank you, Jerry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, this has been really, really great. If there's any way of time for maybe one more question, and yeah, thank you. I think that was Jerry that was speaking. Thank you for that. Does anybody else want to ask a question or need a certificate? I'm going to post the program in a second, and Cynthia at shareselfhelp.org. You can also go to shareselfhelp.org/conferences to get information. And so there you go. Anybody else have something to add?
I actually have a quick question. So I was actually wondering, just recently California has approved the state to certify Medi-Cal peer support specialists, and I was wondering, I saw that the program was based in Oregon. Are you guys also approved for Medi-Cal certification through peer support?
I don't believe so, but Haven, you're on the more VP level there. Do you know?
Yeah, I think I'm not super familiar with the California system. I know Oregon a little bit better. The limited understanding that I do have is that maybe Medi-Cal is like the equivalent to what we call OHP, because would that be peer support billing for Medicaid services? Yeah. So y'all are a little, so we have the ability to bill for Medicaid. The reimbursements, but we're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah,
And that's actually a
that's
big part of what we're doing. Y'all have a state ethics code that is connected to the certification. We don't, which is
Yeah.
part of why for us bringing in the national guidelines is such a big deal, because our agency policy has defaulted anybody who does not have an ethics code directly tied to their credential into the National Association of Social Workers, which has always been a splinter in my brain. But I think the Medi-Cal pieces, a lot of that's pretty consistent with the core competencies. And then there's a couple other items that I think are more focused on maybe regulating the workforce. Whereas the national guidelines really focuses on practice. But yeah, we're heading in similar directions that way.
Yeah, I hope your state gets certified soon enough as well. We are just literally just starting, so there's a lot of things that we are kind of like up in the wind about. We still don't understand billing. We still haven't even got trained for it. We're like barely taking the first couple of steps on there. And I think like since this is going to be pretty much a nationwide initiative, I know just a couple other states have been certified. So hopefully we'll be able to learn more like as we grow as a community. Thank you.
Yeah, I
Thank
hope
you.
so too. And I hope we can keep reaching across organizations like this.
Yeah, Haven and I have an ultimate goal of building coalitions across the West Coast, because the East Coast has great coalition building, but we really need more of it on the West Coast. So hopefully we will be connecting more and more as time goes on.
Well, and speaking back to Annette's experience being the only family peer, like that's hard when you're the only one in your agency. Then it's like, okay, how to start building those networks and learning from the spaces that have had the opportunity to do a little more digging into process building, which is what we're hoping to do here, while at the same time leaning into other peers and spaces to learn more about areas we're growing in, like billing.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a presentation on coalition building next year. We'll see. We'll see. But thank you all so much for your time and your energy and coming to our presentation. I'm so glad that we got to share our learnings with you, and so excited to see how others apply it. And, you know, as you saw our emails at the end of the presentation, if you have other questions, you can email us there, or like if you apply some of this and how does it work for your agency? I know we'd love to hear about that, because we love to learn from other folks. So if you apply this, please let us know. I'd love to see that. I know Haven and I would.
All right, do you want to post